Hi there and welcome to review number 5, I think. So we're on to The Living Daylights. This was a new era in Bond history with a new Bond. Kind of new setup, new Moneypenny as well. Lois Maxwell had left with Roger Moore. And with the new Bond, Timothy Dalton, came a very definitive change in tone. Even though there were little nods to Roger Moore's style and the previous Bonds, this was definitely a shift and definitely taking it away from the overt silliness that Roger Moore's Bonds had kind of become and kind of been populated with. That's not to say there aren't silly moments in this, and that's fine, it's got a few of them, but generally the overall tone of this is different, and we get that almost straight away. So we have a new gun barrel and a good pre-title sequence in Gibraltar, really exciting one actually. And we're introduced to our new Bond as he is taking part in an exercise which is sabotaged over the Rock of Gibraltar. And when Bond, the first thing Bond does when he gets in hand-to-hand combat with an enemy, this Bond, the first thing he does is headbutt someone. Now, you just can't see Roger doing that, can you? So straight away we have a kind of impression, or we've got an indication that this is a new era and a new Bond and someone who's not going to mess around, and certainly he knows how to handle himself, there's no doubt about that. Then we get almost straight away what we get with Dalton's strength. We kind of get his weakness straight away, that when he lands, he escapes or kills the bad guy, parachutes away and lands on a boat, an exotic yacht with a beautiful lady there with a champagne, and he has a little flirtation with her and says he's going to be delayed by a couple of hours. In that moment, you kind of see already that Dalton's not that comfortable with that kind of stuff, that he's not really, those little cheesy moments, doesn't sit right with him, and he's trying to figure out how to do that. And these are moments that were clearly written for, not Roger Moore. We must remember that the person who was going to be in this film was Pierce Brosnan. And Pierce Brosnan certainly had that kind of Roger Moore twinkle in his eye, that Gallic charm, and that was certainly not something that Timothy Dalton, I think, wanted to bring to the part. So straight away we see the good and the bad, the yin and the yang with Dalton and what he's going to bring to the role. We see that hard edge. He can handle himself physically, he's not messing around, but not totally comfortable with that aspect. So I think that was something that probably when he did his second film, he made it quite clear that that aspect was probably something he wouldn't want to be continuing with. So we have the pre-titles, then we've got a great song. I really enjoyed the song. It's a shame that John Barry didn't get on with Aha in doing this. Again, a pedestrian title sequence. I think Maurice Binder was really getting to the point where he was just knocking it out. He wasn't really putting a great deal of thought and effort into it. Although License to Kill, his last one, is probably one of his better ones, but with this one it feels a bit pedestrian. It feels a bit it doesn't really connect in many ways to the actual film. It's the last John Barry soundtrack. It's the last time John Barry did a Bond soundtrack, and I think he went out on a high. We cannot underestimate John Barry's contribution to the Bond soundtracks, and indeed John Barry's contribution to movie soundtracks in total. I think the top 3 of all time for me, I mean, the Hans Zimmers and the James Horners and people like that have been fantastic over the last 20-30 years. But to me, it's John Barry, John Williams and Bernard Herrmann who are the 3, and possibly Ennio Morricone in there as well. So yeah, I'll make it 4. Okay, give me 4. They're the 4 masters of the genre, and they kind of taught everyone else how to do it and how to do it right. So yeah, last John Barry soundtrack, and I really like the soundtrack. It's got a sense of pace and action that had been lost in the previous 2, in Octopussy and in A View to a Kill. They were a bit plodding, whereas this has a sense of something going on, a bit of dynamism about it. So we again, after the titles, we have this scene in Bratislava where Bond's been sent to kill a KGB sniper, which turns out to be Karamalovi. And again, we have a feel that this is a change in tone. This is moving in a different direction to the previous Bonds. It's very espionage, it's very film noir, it's all shot in the shadows. And we have, again, Saunders, the Station V Vienna MI6 agent who's out there. these agents that Bond works with when he's out in the field have an incredible level of incompetence with which I have no idea how they manage to get the job that they've got. There's just basic little things that Saunders just doesn't seem capable of understanding or knowing, in that he's not even in charge of the getaway for his own bloody plan. So Bond, he'll just allow Bond to take over the whole thing. But that whole scene is very well done. It's got a John le Carre film noir feel to it. It certainly has that kind of very different tone. Almost goes back to the days of From Russia with Love. You kind of feel this is proper spying. And there's a great getaway when he's in the little pig, that the cleaning gadget that cleans the Trans-Siberian pipeline. And it's a fantastic scene. I really like that. And then the Harrier jump jet, and it's all done really well. And again, we have that thing that Bond films did in the kind of 80s, possibly 70s as well, where Julie T. Wallace pops up. And this is the kind of thing they did. They cast someone who was kind of in tune with the culture of the time, and Julie T. Wallace at the time had found a great deal of fame and indeed notoriety in a series called The Life and Loves of a She-Devil. And she was fantastic in that, and she pops up in this. And again, that's kind of what the Bond franchise did a lot, where not only it was the current top singer who did the song, they would prop in other popular culture references along the way, and Julie T. Wallace got her moment there, and then she's quite funny, and she plays that out quite well. So the whole operation to get Koskov out of the East is fantastic and done really well. And then we go into our kind of new setup. We have our new M, Robert Brown. Well, he's not new. He's been in the previous 3 movies, but he's no Bernard Lee. But we've got M, who's done the previous 2. We've got a new Moneypenny, and unfortunately for Caroline Bliss, I have to say she's the weakest of all the Moneypennies. She didn't really get what it was all about. There was just too much sighing and panting after Bond, and just not enough sass, and not enough of the flirting. Should be a very equal flirt between the two of them. And you certainly get a sense with Lois Maxwell that she was a bit in charge of him, and he quite liked that there was a little bit of control going on there. And you never really get that feeling with Caroline Bliss. And she's hardly even in License to Kill, so she had a pretty ignominious time as Miss Moneypenny. Bond smokes. It's weird to see James Bond. It's weird to see anyone smoking these days in films, but to see James Bond with a cigarette. I know he smoked a cigar in Die Another Day, but I think maybe he smokes in License to Kill as well. But yeah, this was officially the end of the era for Bond's smoking. And when we remember the very first time we met James Bond in Doctor No, he lit up a cigarette as he said the immortal line, "The name's Bond, James Bond." So given that this was the 80s, even then it looks looks fine when you see it in the 60s, in the 60s films, but when you see it in 80s films, it kind of looks odd to see James Bond smoking. Q Branch does its little bit, and with a stunning lack of risk assessment in Q Branch, it really is. The Ghetto Blaster, which is a good gag, I quite like that. He's about to fire it as 2 guys are still farting about with the target range. It's like, come on, can you give these guys some warning, so get a risk assessment. Health and safety in Q Branch is not a place to work. It's not a safe place to be. I wouldn't want to get promoted into that department. That's not somewhere you want to be. Then we have the Blade and Safe House scene, and this is one of my favourite Bond scenes of all time. I think it's fantastic, and it's fantastic for a bizarre reason, in that James Bond's hardly in it. When we get to the action where Necros does the fakes getting Koskov back for the Russians, for the KGB, Bond's gone, he's left the scene. And what's good is actually seeing other people who work for MI6 who are capable, who've got some game, and who can deliver the goods. Because again, as I said earlier, often what you get with the people surrounded by Bond are quite incompetent and a little bit crap. But here we see the MI6 agent in the kitchen in the Blade and Safe House giving Necros as good as he gets, and it's a proper good fight, and you see these guys have got some game and they've got some skills. So it's good to see that, and I really enjoy that scene. I think it's fantastic. It's really slick, it's really polished, it's executed really well. It's exciting, it's interesting, and it also has an element of you don't really know what's going on. What the hell is happening here. So that's good as well, because usually by the time we got to Octopussy and A View to a Kill, you could predict the next 10 minutes, every 10 minutes that passed, you kind of knew what was coming. It was all fairly well telegraphed. But in this one, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm a little bit confused. I'm not sure entirely what's happening here. So, really well executed scene. Geoffrey Keane as Sir Frederick Grey. I think this might have been his last appearance in a Bond movie as well. The longest serving Minister of Defence in the history of politics. I think he'd been Minister of Defence from 1977 to 1987. Good on you, sir. Well done. That's a fair shift. You deserve your retirement. So I think that was the last time we saw Frederick Grey. We saw Geoffrey Keane, who'd been a kind of regular, popping up in all the films pretty much since The Spy Who Loved Me. Then we go to Bratislava. Bond heads off. He's suspicious about Koskov. He doesn't quite believe the Schmerz-Bionen plot that the Russians are reigniting. So he doesn't quite trust Koskov. And it's good. Dalton plays that well. He plays that whole feeling of I'm not into you and I don't quite get or think that you're the real deal. So he has a bit of reluctance there. And we see Kara playing the cello, and then we see her getting arrested by the KGB on a bus. But she's a famous cello player. Why didn't they just go and get her at the conservatory? It's like she was just there playing cello. Why do you need to stop a bus and get her off that? Come on, you're the KGB, get better. Bit odd. There's a curious moment, and again, this happens a lot in TV and film, and I never understand why they get it so wrong. Bond goes to Kara's flat and finds a picture she has of Yorgi, of Koskov, and it's just clearly a headshot of Jerome Krebby. It's clearly an actor's headshot. And I just think with these things, that happens all the time. It even happens in EastEnders. You see these family photographs on the mantelpiece, and it's all clearly these headshots. Can you not just fake some shots of people in the pub? Can you not just fake some shots of, that look like they're clearly not done by a professional photographer? And it's, even if it was in uniform, it'd be his official KGB or Russian army photograph, but it's not even that. So that kind of stuff really bugs me. Then we have a quite elaborate escape as Kara and Bond get out of Bratislava. There's some great stuff with an Aston Martin, and again here we're back to a little bit of the silliness now. Stuff that was probably written for a Pierce Brosnan Bond, or stuff that was probably written in lines that were written for a Brosnan Moore-esque type Bond. So when Dalton delivers all the little one-liners as all the gadgets are getting fired off on the Aston Martin, again you sense his discomfort with that. He doesn't really enjoy that, and I don't think he's getting it. It doesn't sit well with him. But the Aston Martin and the gadgets and all that is pretty good. I quite like that scene. And then we have a pretty silly escape. And again, I think Dalton probably thought, again, you sense his sort of reluctance to play this out as the escape on the cello case. And some pretty lax security at the Austrian border coming out of Czechoslovakia into Austria. One guy is not armed and he just lets them go through with one passport. Odd. So then we go to Vienna, and this was a Bond which did the kind of big location stuff, and it took us about a fair bit of locations. And Vienna looks amazing. It's fantastic. Some great scenes there. The scene at the Ferris wheel and the famous iconic scenes from Vienna. And Saunders pops up again, but this time he seems to be a bit more competent. He seems to have picked up, found out how to do his job a little bit better. But of course, then he dies in a way that since has made me be very cautious when I walk through sliding glass doors. I think of that every single time I see a sliding glass door, and I wait for the door to open and then I'll run through it. It's a pretty horrific moment, and again quite a brutal death, and the kind of scene which you would think wouldn't have sat well with Roger Moore. And again, this is them dipping a toe in the water and saying, this is a kind of different era, this is a different Bond, this is the way we're going and the way we're going to do this. This was a step towards when you remember, this is a step towards doing then what they did successfully in 2005, and everyone kind of assumes that Dalton's Bond wasn't very successful. And it kind of wasn't, I suppose, but maybe it was just too early. And then what they did in 2006 with Casino Royale, what they did then was kind of what they were trying to do with Dalton. They made that attempt then, but it was maybe after Roger Moore too much too soon. So we get away from, so Necros kills Saunders. Again, he's got his personal stereo on with that Pretender song, which he clearly just loves. He clearly has an obsession with it, because he was listening to it at the Blade and Safe House as well. It seems to be the only song he's got on his cassette player. Yes, folks, it was a Walkman. It would have been a cassette. No MP3 players or iPods then. It was an old-fashioned. It was old school. It was the old world. And clearly, Necros just had one song on loop on that cassette, which was the "Where Has Everybody Gone" by the Pretenders, which is a great song. Actually, it's a great non-Bond song in the sense that it wasn't a title song, but it works very well as a Bond song. We go to Tangier and we're introduced to John Rhys-Davies, who I think is a great character in Pushkin, and it's a shame that he never popped up again in a Bond movie. I think John Rhys-Davies is a wonderful actor, and I think the character's really good, and I think the exchange between Pushkin and Bond when they're trying to untangle and work out what the hell Koskov is up to, and that, again, that feels very, very Secret Service. And done in a way that, again, feels like that Dalton's trying there to put his mark on how he wants to play the character, because he does that very much in a way that his predecessors would not have, and he plays it coldly and callously. And then they set up in a lovely little gag after Pushkin gets fake killed, and his wife's crying over his dead body, and he sits up. It's a nice little moment, and there's little moments of that I really enjoy. And that was where, it was clear they were saying, yeah, we've got a new Bond, we've got a change in tone, but we're not forgetting that there's a bit of fun, and we have to have fun. We know you want a bit of fun, something that I think perhaps they forgot to do in 2006 when they came back with Daniel Craig. They kind of thought, yeah, let's just go all the way here, let's go all in and go a little bit more Bourne, and where I think that Jason Bourne films could have done with a little bit more fun in them, just a tiny little bit, could have done a little bit more. The Bond films certainly shouldn't have turned their back on that, because that is an element, and we've come to see that through Skyfall and Spectre, that they've brought little bits of that back into the franchise, and it's good that The Living Daylights continued to have that. We meet another Felix Leiter, and he's a dreadful one, played by John Terry, who clearly went on to have a much better career in football, because he was no great shakes as an actor. It's a different John Terry. It's a joke. Okay, sorry. But yeah, terrible Felix Leiter, and he's only got about 10 lines, and he screws up most of them. So the reason Leiter's there, I'm not entirely sure. It makes kind of no sense, and it just pops up for just to say we've got Felix Leiter in a movie. Of course, Timothy Dalton turns out to be the only James Bond who encounters Felix Leiter in all of his films. So there is that, I suppose. We go to Afghanistan. Yeah, interesting that we're in Afghanistan and James Bond working very closely with... remember those old-fashioned, those good old days when the Taliban, or the Mujahideen as they were called then, were funded and trained by the Americans and given all sorts of money to fight against the Russians? Remember those days when we taught them how to do lots of bad shit to the West in later years? Yeah, those were the days, eh? Yeah, so we go into the kind of political sphere here where, and again, a part of the plot which dates this film and marks it out as the moment in history when it is set. It can only really be set then when the Russians, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and we have Bond working with the Mujahideen, and beautifully played by Art Malik as the leader of the Mujahideen in that area, and Art Malik's fantastic. He's got charisma, he's got charm, he's got style, and he's a wonderful addition. And again, you think maybe there's a character they could have brought back, but obviously a bit too politically sensitive maybe to bring that character back in another context. The end of Living Daylights is fantastic. I think the whole stuff in the Hercules plane is amazing. The stunts at the end, the fight when they're hanging off the sacks of the drugs hanging off the back of the plane, two stuntmen up there on a plane filming that, doing it. And actually, what kind of annoys me a little bit about how people will reflect on that, I think future generations will probably watch stuff like that and dismiss it, thinking and just assuming it was CGI'd, and not really aware that these guys were actually up there doing that. And I hope somewhere someone insists, or maybe there's a big sign on maybe when they show these things eventually on Twitch or on TikTok or whatever it is that they're watching it on, the big sign saying, "This is real, this is not CGI. CGI did not exist at this time. This is two amazing stuntmen doing a fantastic job. Please remember that." And it's an amazing scene. It's an astonishing piece of work, and it's really tense. It's really exciting. And of course we have we build up to the finale, and we have a kind of useless epilogue. Bond films in the 70s and 80s did this little epilogue thing at the end. They kind of ditched it for The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker and stuff like that, but you had this little epilogue like Teehee, like the Mr. Wint, Mr. Kidd. It was the henchman. It was usually the henchman who's coming back to get his final little go at Bond. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I don't think it worked in this. Brad Whittaker, Joe Don Baker's a great actor, and of course he popped up again in 2 more Bond films, in GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. But Brad Whittaker, the character, didn't really become anything, and it hadn't really fleshed out enough to justify this little epilogue where it kind of sets up the notion that he was the main villain all along, and if he was, it didn't really play out that way. And it didn't feel that he deserved that big moment. And of course, unusually, the main villain, Koskov, who Jerome Krebby did play for laughs the whole way through, really survives unusually, or maybe he doesn't. Of course, we know he goes back to the Soviet Union, and we're not entirely sure what happened to him. Probably was never seen again, but he certainly survives Bond's clutches, and he makes it away from 007 intact, but probably not for long. So yeah, that was, and another thing that happened at the end, we saw Walter Gotell, his final appearance. Walter Gotell had a long and rich history with connection with the Bond films, all the way back to From Russia with Love, when he played a Spectre agent, and then from 1977 in The Spy Who Loved Me, he pretty much was a regular in the series, popping up in most films as General Gogol. General Gogol was supposed to be Pushkin in this one, but Walter Gotell wasn't well enough. He was ailing by this point. And actually I'm quite glad, because I think Pushkin's a better character, and I think it would have been a shame to have done that to Gogol, and I'm not sure that it would have worked as well. So in a sense that was quite fortuitous, but it was nice to see Walter Gotell at the end again. Like, Jeffrey Keane, who played Frederick Grey, we thank you for your service, and gave us great joy. And again, what I always liked was the consistency. That's what bugs me about the Felix Leiter debacle, was in most other areas of the Bond movies they kept a consistency with actors and characters that they just shamelessly didn't care about when it came to Felix Leiter. So it was nice to see Walter Gotell again and give him a little bit of a send-off, although they probably didn't know at the time, but a little bit of send-off. I'm pretty sure he died not long after that film was released. And then another little short-lived tradition happened at the end of this film. We got the end titles with a different song. Up until this point, the end titles had either had the James Bond theme or the main title song playing over the end credits. But here we had an alternative song, If There Was a Man, a nice lovey-dovey romantic song from the Pretenders, who did 2 songs for this film, with John Barry. And it's a nice song, nice way to end it. And that was a kind of little tradition that continued for a few Bonds. And it was a nice sort of balance. It bookended it quite well, and it just wasn't. They were trying to a little bit more effort, I suppose, other than just sticking the title song on the end again. We've heard it; it's fine. We don't need to hear it again. Give us something else. So yeah, so that was Timothy Dalton's foray into the world of 007, and it's a bloody good one, and I really enjoy it. I always enjoy watching The Living Daylights. I really enjoyed watching it tonight. There's a lot to love in it. It's not perfect, and there are moments where Dalton clearly is finding his feet, and it would have been interesting to see if he went on to do maybe 3 or 4 Bond movies and see what he would have done with it. But we didn't sadly get that opportunity. But I'm sure at some point we'll come back to License to Kill, maybe even next. So let's find out what I'm doing next. Yes, as I've always done, I've got my James Bond playlist. I've taken all the ones off that I've done, and we start off with the James Bond theme. And we find out where we're going next. So I've got it on shuffle. Let's see where we are. Wow. Okay, so interestingly, maybe my favourite James Bond film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Notorious, of course, for starring George Lazenby. But I think, well, maybe I'll not say. We'll see what happens. But at the moment, my thoughts are, it's in my top 3 Bond movies of all time. So let's see what a rewatch does. See if it changes. Maybe my opinion might change. Maybe watching Die Another Day and Thunderball might have changed my mind, and I might think that they're better. Sorry, I couldn't even do that or say that seriously. Sorry. So yeah, thanks for listening, and if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and comment and let me know what you think of these films. I'd love to know your opinion. Tell me what you agree with, what you disagree with. This is my opinion. You might think it's a lot of bollocks. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time for On Her Majesty's Secret Service.